Part 2.
Well, now I'd like to give you 5 useful tips for drafting retention clauses. First of all, a good clause should be written clearly. It should explicitly state that ownership, or title in the goods, won't pass to the buyer until the goods have been paid for. A second thing to keep in mind is the fact that the clause should also include the requirement that the buyer of the goods must store the goods separately from other goods. The goods should be clearly labelled as the property of the supplier until payment for them has been made. The reason for this is that liquidators ask for proof that those goods have not been paid for. So it's enormously helpful to make sure that the product serial number printed on the invoice is also written on the goods. A third point, I would recommend that the clause includes wording to the effect that the buyer agrees that he won't resell the goods until they've been paid for. Remember that there'll be a greater risk that the clause amounts to a charge if the buyer has the right to sell the goods before the seller's received payment for them. I now come to my fourth point. Another thing to take into consideration is what the buyer will do with the goods. If the buyer intends to use the goods in a way that'll result in their losing their form, this means they can't be recovered, and so the clause may be void. In one case, the product was a chemical, an ingredient used to make another product, and the court held that once it was used in the manufacturing process, a claim over the finished product under the retention of title clause was invalid because the original product no longer existed. So, when the seller tried to claim rights over the resulting product, he was claiming rights over additional property. This, of course, meant the transaction was a charge. In another case, retrieving the product was possible. It was attached to the floor of a building, and so it could be retrieved by unscrewing. In that case, the clause was valid. My fifth and final point is the issue of recovery of the goods. A well-written clause will say that the supplier has a right of entry to recover the goods. Allow me to give you another example. In one case, a supplier of computer equipment was able to walk right into an office and pick up and take away the goods under a retention of title clause. No one said anything or tried to stop him, and the clause allowed this. Are there any questions? Not yet? Well, then I'd suggest at this point that we have a look at a well-drafted retention of title clause.